Coming up next, our next session for the day is a practitioner's discussion on the topic applications and value of enterprise AI. The objective of this session is to showcase the innovation driven by AI at an enterprise level, which will help India build its own innovation narrative. Enterprises which have been some of the early adopters of AI and its underlying technologies will share their views on how organizations can best leverage AI for creating impact and value. Our speakers for this session are Rohit Pandakar, Vice President, Head of Data Science, Mahindra Finance; Suresh Iyer, CIO, Blue Star Limited; and Venkatesh Natarajan, Chief Digital Officer and Senior Vice President, IT, Ashok Leyland. Chairing this session is Pradeep Menon, Managing Director, HSBC Technology India and Global CIO, Group Data Technology and Engineering, HSBC. At HSBC, Pradeep's role includes working in alignment with multiple teams on a global scale, in addition to the one in India. He is responsible for the data engineering function and leads the data services team based in India. Pleasure to have you all with us this afternoon. Over to you, Pradeep.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the session today. AI is one of those mystical topics in technology. Even amongst those who are familiar with technology generally, it evokes all kinds of emotions. Some of us are scared, saying it'll probably take over the world. Some of it think we already has. Some of us already think it already has. And then some of us think that we're in a matrix, right? So some say it's going to get us unemployed. Some say that AI is going to be the panacea for all mankind. So you see all kinds of emotions that come. It will probably be the cure for diseases, stop wars before they're even fought. You get the picture, right? But one thing is for sure, AI and ML is definitely changing how all of us on this panel discussion today is changing the way we work with our customers, right? So from understanding our customers better to rationalizing operations or making it safer for businesses and customers, AI is doing it all. AI has also found good foothold, even in some basic form. This discussion is going to be more about how that's happening and how much more can we do. Right. With that, I have a very pretty erudite panel that I have here with me, and I'm going to introduce them. We have Suresh Iyer, who is the CIO of Blue Star Limited. Suresh orchestrates transformational initiatives to deliver digitization covering Blue Star's ecosystem products, customers, dealers, and suppliers. He strongly believes that data is the key to unlocking the true potential of an organization. Welcome, Suresh.
Thank you.
We have Rohit Pandharkar from Mahindra Finance. Rohit is a multiple patent holder and he's published in various areas of AI. So he's a great panelist that we have today. He's been a TED speaker and a journal reviewer. He's the vice president of with Mahindra Finance and heads data science in their financial services unit. So welcome, Rohit.
And hello, everyone.
And then we have Venkatesh, Venkatesh Natarajan, who serves as the Chief Digital Officer and the Senior Vice President for Information Technology at Ashok Leyland. Venkatesh is passionate about driving digital transformation and building high-performance teams. Welcome, VN.
Thank you, Pradeep, and nice to be here. Look forward.
Thank you. Given that we only have, it's going to be a quick session, let's jump straight into it, right? One of the things that I'm going to ask each and every one of us, and we'll go around the table, is how do each of y'all who come from very different industries see AI changing your business models? How is it changing the way you're working, and how do you see the potential is, right? So let me start with Suresh from Blue Star. Suresh, what are your views on this topic?
Sure. Before I start, just one liner on Blue Star to set the context. Blue Star is in the business of air and water purification and conditioning. And we have a number of products servicing both residential and commercial customers. And we do this both in India and globally. That is primarily to share with you where I'm coming from as well. Okay. AI for Blue Star, or within our industry, to be specific also, has been, well, it started from service, to be honest, okay, in our company, and that was some 5 years ago. Subsequently, what we have been seeing is it has started appearing in almost every aspect of our operation as we became more and more familiar with it, as we became more and more comfortable with it, and when we started getting more and more data into the enterprise, and that is what led us to a complete explosion of AI use cases within the company. Today we have AI use cases running across almost every sphere of our operation, and frankly speaking, if I look back upon where we were 3 years back and where we are today, it's quite a huge difference in terms of how our sales functions, how our service teams function, how our procurement teams function, Even our finance to a large extent has been enabled to use a lot of these kind of technologies. And to share one specific example, just to go a bit deeper, my favorite use case has been always been my chiller remote monitoring, which we set up some 5 years back. We started it with the intent of having a service team monitor what is happening at a customer site. Okay, that was the initial use case, and so that we could avoid the cost of sending somebody, and also the time which was being taken to send somebody to a customer site would be offset, and the fix would be immediate. Okay, so that was stabilized to a large extent, but that is when we started really seeing the benefit of that technology. The data started coming in, and that data started proving to be of immense value to us. Today what is happening to us is something totally unexpected. It's forget service, we are actually looking at how we what we do in terms of pricing of our AMCs. Our annual maintenance contracts is one of our significant service revenues. Earlier we used to have a standard pricing model which was based on the age, the type of equipment, the location where it is, proximity to a service location, standard parameters, and therefore a standard pricing for any customer within a particular category of that specific parameters, those specific parameters. But what has changed is, thanks to the data which is coming in through the remote monitoring, and that too integrated with our service operations, whatever happens at a customer side, we are now able to arrive at a much more clinical view of what does it take to service a customer on an annualized basis. This is on the basis of what happens there. It's on the basis of being able to predict a lot of things right up front. Okay, we no longer have to wait for something to happen. We are able to do it, and through that we are able to enhance the quality of the functioning as well. Thanks to this, now we are got a completely different model where our pricing has changed completely. Plus we are now able to offer certain other facilities or services as add-ons, one of them being SLA based services, and second is predictive service itself, where we no longer have to go into a preventive mode. 4 times a year or 5 times a year was the norm. We no longer need to do that. Our parts are also getting much better utilized and much better planned. So overall, there's a big impact on that sector of the business. And the same thing we are now trying to replicate across many other areas, where we see something start off, but what is happening is a mushrooming of more and more benefits as we go deeper and deeper into it. So that's in short what we have been trying to do. Frankly speaking, it's been an amazing journey so far.
Thank you so much, Suresh, for your views. And just to coming into it from the banking world, I've personally seen that AI and analytics is used at various layers or levels. Right, the more obvious outer layers would be things like customer behavior analysis, spending patterns that help us create more effective offers, or creating sentiment analysis, just based on what people are saying on social media and so on. But the inner or the more deeper levels will be AI in areas like fraud detection or money laundering, where there is not only speed as well as filtering false and true positives that we get. That actually helps financial institutions keep our customers' money safe, and as importantly, ensuring that they're not unwittingly used by bad actors. For example, we have something called GSNA, which is the Global Social Network Analytics, which gives our compliance teams a way to get some contextual, comprehensive view of customer activities and relationships. It's powered by a decision engine, decision intelligence platform, which uses both AI and big data. And in the first year, we can see the benefits come out. In the very first year, we found it's far more effective than manual methods in detecting financial crime. It also generates far more alerts, which are true positives compared to our previous processes, right? And again, things like launching what we call the AI-powered multi-asset index, right? It's a family, the first rules-based multi-asset investment strategy that actually helps customers. So that's something from the world of banking. Trying quickly, moving on to Rohit. Rohit, this is where I'm eager to hear from you, because you come from that specific sub-vertical of BFSI, that is rural finance. So where do you see AI fitting into an NBFC's unique needs?
Yeah, so oftentimes in finance, we have heard of AI being done by Citibank, Capital One, American Express, and the likes, right? Especially the US retail credit card businesses and unsecured loans. However, here we are in Mahindra Finance trying to use AI to give loans to a farmer in Vidarbha growing cotton over a 2-acre land. So how do you apply AI there? And we have been able to use cutting edge algorithms in 3 areas of data. First data is demographic data. We use data points like whether the customer is living in a pakka ghar or a kacha ghar, like, does he have a concrete house or not? In rural India, having a concrete household itself is a big thing, right? And it's a differentiator. So that could be a variable. The distance of the customer's house from the town center or the city center is another area. or variable that we can use. We can even use things like the cattle ownership, the educational levels, etc. Of course, with whatever is available within the regulatory framework as variables to be used. Then we also use transactional variables like what amount he is looking for, what interest rate, etc. And third and most interesting is we have started using alternate data, which means which mobile phone device is the person using, at what time is he applying for the loan, what apps are there on his phone, what is his contact list like, what is his telephone bill like. We are partnering with telcos like Jio, Airtel, etc. to get to know what is the utility spending of his talk time on his mobile phone, what is the internet data usage, and using that we are giving loans worth $10 billion every year, about 80,000 crores worth of AUM, all in rural India, spread across 1,300 branches. So that's where we are applying AI, and that's just one use case. But we also do this for collections. Like in COVID, we are trying to use AI to predict where our NPAs are going to shoot up, who is going to pay the EMIs, whom to cross-sell, whom to resell, and many other use cases which are standard in BFSI as well, but for very rural customer. That's our differentiator.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rohit. Very interesting insights from the world of rural finance. Moving on to VN. VN, you come from an organization that has customers across the length and breadth of India. How is AI or analytics in general shaping your industry?
Pradeep, the automotive industry has never seen a situation like this in its entire existence of, say, about 110 plus years. We are now poised for major disruptions riding on these mega trends. You must have heard of these trends in the automotive industry, which we call it as CASE: connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. And technology, digital is playing a very, very major role, and various assorted technologies are playing a role in driving these disruptions. It could be edge computing, it could be 5G, which is coming up now, AR, VR, and of course a very major role which AI plays. So I call this as, 8 years back, when this whole discussion around digital started, people were talking of SMAC technology, social, mobile, analytics, and the cloud. And then later, when this IoT came about 5-6 years ago, called it as ISMAC. Now with AI, I call this as IABC, is what we call it. That is Internet of Things, which is so much of sensors, because our vehicles are all fitted with so much of sensors today. IABC, A for AI, B for big data, and C for cloud. So meaning to say, you're deploying AI on the data which is in the form of a big data which is residing on the cloud. That's the way you kind of read that. And this is a very, very powerful cocktail that is driving all these major trends in the automotive industry, to the extent that the automotive industry will slowly transition from a product-centric to a solution-centric. And this is going to be heavily powered by AI. For example, when I say business model changes, you're already seeing this happen. Vehicle performance to vehicle connectivity as a USP, right? The way vehicles are serviced is slowly now changing because of the flashing over the air technology. Today, we are able to flash data through the internet to, fix problems on the engine or those subsystems which are kind of data driven. So there's a whole lot of changes which are happening. Just to give you some examples of what is happening, and as a vision in Ashok Leyland, we say that today we are an AI-enabled Ashok Leyland, or AI-enabled EL in short term. And our vision is that we should move from an AI-enabled AL to an AI-led AL. That is a vision. And as part of the vision, we would want to embed AI in every facet of our operations. One classic example is our connected vehicle platform. We capture a humongous amount of data, and all our vehicles are connected today, right? We say we capture about 2 terabytes of data every day. We churn this data, we process this data using a lot of ML algorithms, and then provide some very useful insights to beneficiaries. We call them as the 5 beneficiaries: customer, channel, company, the community, and the collaborator. So huge amount of benefits we derive from the deployment of AI from our connected vehicles. And similarly, we have got a lot of initiatives which are going as part of our AI initiative on the shop floor also, as part of our industry 4.0 and so on. So overall, I think, AI is here to stay, and this is going to completely disrupt not only the automotive industry, I truly believe even the other industries also moving forward.
No, but thanks for that, Ian. In fact, I was just thinking as this conversation was going on that all of you as practitioners and bringing AI to the respective industries that you work in, doing all of this wouldn't have been easy. Be it manufacturing or the automobile setup, or if it's a BFSI sector, whether it be international or national, whether it be urban or rural, the challenges would have been there, right? So it'd be very interesting to know what challenges you face, right, in the context of the nature of your businesses where you operate. So let me come back to you, Suresh, starting with you. What challenges did you face in driving AI, and what was the key learning from it? How did you overcome those challenges?
I think it's a very good question, Pradeep, and I don't think it's a very short answer to that because we did go through a journey. Okay, I mean it was not easy. AI itself is something which me and my team, we had to learn it first. We had to understand its application. We had to understand the power behind it. We had to understand what goes into it and how do we get all of it. The good thing which we did is we have started the data collection exercise in the company some 7 years back when we wanted to automate every part of our business. So luckily for us, data was coming in. But how to make meaningful use of it was perhaps the first thing where we had to learn the business. And we literally had to get into every single area to try and see what was happening there, what their challenges were. So we literally became businessmen, to be honest, because it was not fair of us to expect the business to learn AI and other things to come up with possible use cases, right? It was easier for us to get down to that. And that was one big thing which we felt was significant. I mean, it is not easy to find those use cases and make sense out of it. And that is where you need to have a very strong understanding of the domain in which you're trying to apply it. One classic case is our products itself. Our products have got a very interesting combination of areas, right? It's got mechanics in it, it's got hydraulics in it, it's got thermodynamics, it's got electronics, it's got electricals. You can't find a guy who knows all of this plus AI or how to interpret the data. Fundamentally, that's what it is, right? For us, the initial challenge was just that, trying to figure out how do we apply AI in the context of these areas, the data which was getting collected in these areas, and try and see how to derive some powerful insights which could really help the business. And that is where it took us a lot of time to make sure that we got the right set of people in. And then in this case, we got domain specific people and trained them on AI. Fundamentally young people who were out of college with these kind of specializations, and through them we embedded the concepts of AI and then had them start looking at this whole problem. So that took us time. So consuming time or spending time in realizing some of these use cases was a real challenge, primarily because of the fact that you need to understand what the business is all about before you can actually apply it. The second thing which is more recent is, which I think everybody must be facing, is a problem of plenty. Now that we have overcome all those initial things, we have been able to bring the technologies in, we are able to get the data, we are able to interpret the data, we got the people who understand it. What we are seeing as a little explosion of use cases. We can see so many possibilities today, but unfortunately we just don't have the time or budget to be able to address all of it at the same time. That's number one. Number two is it's not feasible to start doing everything, because you need to let the business also adapt to whatever enablement you're doing for them or whatever insights you're bringing. They have to make some changes in the way they function, the way they operate, and that is sort of a cyclical relationship. So we are not able to go ahead and implement everything. So there is a very linear progression here, which perhaps is a challenge. If we could overcome it, then perhaps it could benefit the business a whole lot faster and a whole lot better. So two distinct areas, which one was in the past, one which is more recent. Frankly speaking, it's still there. We have still not been able to figure it out.
Very interesting indeed. Rohit, moving on to you. Mahindra Finance is a 25-year-old enterprise focused on lending to rural India. Now, like I was saying earlier, it's a very different world than the rest of the worlds that we're typically used to interacting with on a daily basis. So, for you, what kind of challenges did you see in adopting AI and analytics culturally, which I think would have been a big barrier there? How did you overcome that? What are your learnings from that space?
So, our challenges were most of cultural and adoption challenges. You could build the greatest risk algorithm in the world and it may be very accurate, but what if the person on the ground, who is the field executive, who is taking the loan application on his mobile app, doesn't believe in a robotic system of lending, or doesn't believe in the fact that his job that he has been doing for several years and the expertise that he has been building will be replaced by some robotic system that is faceless and formless. People felt threatened, people felt worried, people found all sorts of excuses at times, saying that what if the loan goes bad, what if the parameters are not appropriate, would the algorithm know if you're financing a drunkard, right, or financing a local goon, because the algorithm can only see the parameters but can't see the person in front. So all sorts of challenges and exceptions were coming up. However, we ran a train the trainer program, right, which is a lot of cultural transformation programs and workshops to teach people, first of all, why manual credit evaluation is difficult, why one single person cannot evaluate hundreds of people with the same accuracy. It's just the way AI is being used by radiologists for cancer detection, right? It doesn't reduce the importance of the radiologist. It doesn't take away the job of the radiologist, but it just helps the radiologist. I often give this example internally that AI or machine learning tools are like thermometers for the doctor, or a stethoscope for the doctor. Does the stethoscope ever reduce the importance of the doctor? No. But would you want to go to a doctor who doesn't even use a stethoscope? No, right? You want your doctor to be equipped with all the right tools. So this is the example in layman language and simple terms we give to the field executives who are rural folks, right? They are from the same village and locality, and they need to be trained what is AI, why will it give an accurate estimate of the loan default, and why we should believe in whatever the algorithm is saying. So those were the challenges, and I'm glad that we have overcome them now and are able to transform into a data-driven organization from a very manual credit evaluation algorithm.
Very nice, Rohit. And I'm sure, at least I for sure, I'm going to take back your analogy of the doctor and how AI tools can be equated to the doctor and the stethoscopes, right? So moving on to VN. VN, if someone were to relook at their data or AI strategy or take it to the next level, what advice do you have for them, right? Or let's put it this way, what are the foundational structural elements that according to you an organization should focus on to build an effective deployment, just to ensure success of AI in their organization? What's your take on that?
I think for organizations which get started on an AI journey, embarking on an AI journey, it's very critical that you look at your foundational elements, as I said, the structural elements, as you were calling it, right? I think the first thing is, I call this as data discovery and data inventory process. If we all believe that AI is very, very data hungry, very, very data intensive, and today we have got capability of processing not only structured data, but also unstructured data. And from an automotive perspective, there's so much of data. And if you were to categorize them and then segment them, mostly people talk of ERP data, CRM data, which is all structured data, and I call that as a Pacific Ocean. And then you have the engineering data, because automotive companies have got a huge kind of an engineering IT landscape, your computer-aided design, your simulation systems, your testing systems, and so on. And that I compare as the Atlantic Ocean, okay, in terms of the data availability. And the Atlantic Ocean is smaller, but no smaller than the Pacific Ocean. That is also equally big. And the other one is, today in the manufacturing industry, the kind of data which is there available on the shop floor for you to capture, right? Today you suddenly realize that machines are all connected today. There are smart machines, there are smart tools. Even torque wrenches are also IoT enabled with sensors which can track the amount of torque which is being applied and so on. So it is important for us to, especially for organizations which are fairly kind of old organizations like us who already have a very large kind of a manufacturing footprint, you will have to go through the data discovery process to discover what kind of data is there. And I call that as an Antarctic Ocean, because the Antarctic Ocean is the ocean which is least kind of explored. So you will have to do a ocean kind of ocean floor mapping to identify what are those data. And that's precisely what we have been doing. We are still in the process of identifying, especially on the shop floor, the kind of data which is available with these various machines seem to be generating and consuming. So the first point here is, takeaway here is, you have to get into a data discovery process. And I call this as a data landscape 3.0. Data landscape in most of the organizations, 1.0 would be a ERP data, CRM data, and so on. Data landscape 2.0 is organizations which have gone ahead with digital platforms. It could be e-commerce platforms or whatever, right? So data from that, which is your data 2.0. Data 3.0 is looking at every opportunity where you can capture data. And more importantly, unstructured data, all those interactions with the customers, whether it's in the form of audio, whether it's in the form of video, because through AI, you're able to process and mine insights from all these kind of data. So I think that's the first best practice, should I say, or a kind of an advice which I would have: get into a data discovery process. Second, build that organizational capability to identify use cases. And Suresh very beautifully articulated on the challenges that organizations have. Do you have the capability in the organization to identify use cases, correct? So today the need is, you need to have more problem finders apart from problem solving. And unfortunately, most of the tech guys, the IT guys, are more of problem solving than problem finding. Do you then have data hunters, the guys who can identify data and then say this is useful data, and then start looking at how do you capture that data? You need to develop the capability in the organization of data hunters in the organization. That is the second kind of a foundational element which organizations have to work on. The third one is, do you have the capability to sniff intelligence when looking at the data? Not all people can interpret or infer from the data. How do you build that capability when someone looks at data? And it could be in any form, graphical form, some dashboards or so, to draw inferences for meaningful decisions and meaningful actions later on. That itself is a cultural change that we will have to bring in. And I feel most of the organizations are looking at data from a 2D perspective. It's important that you will have to start looking at building capability in the organization as something which is foundational, to start reading data from a 3D perspective. So that's a third one. The fourth one is, when you're building all these and you're becoming more and more matured in your AI journey, data privacy inclusions become very, very critical, right? For example, if you say that I'm going to now capture the camera feeds with the CCTV cameras on the shop floor, and then do some intelligence on identifying SOP compliance and productivity improvements and so on. For all you know, the workman could come and then say that, no, you're intruding into our privacy. Why do you have a camera out there, right? So those elements that needs to be taken into account when you're embarking on a journey. The fifth one, of course, is your sustained leadership commitment and patronage for this AI journey, which is very critical. We all know that. Without that, you need to get these people onboarded. And then more importantly, you'll have to ensure that they continue to provide all the kind of support and patronage for all your AI projects which you're building. And then the sixth one is building a framework for explainable AI, responsible AI, and ethical AI. Very, very critical as you mature on your AI journey, because sometimes when you especially get into neural networks and all that, it becomes a black box, right? There will be a need for you to explain, how you have arrived at a particular outcome. So explainable, responsible AI, ethical AI is the sixth one, which I say. The last one is, I think you need to work on building AI metric framework, so that whatever you do as part of your AI project, you're able to identify and measure tangible benefits in a very objective way, the kind of benefits and the ROI you get from these AI projects. These are the 7 structural elements or foundations which organizations need to focus on building and making it more robust if they really want to taste the success in their AI journey going forward.
Thank you, VN. I can so resonate with what your advice your advice is, right? It's so spot on. And as well, I completely agree with what Suresh and Rohit had to say about challenges. There is clearly a common thread, which just connects the challenges and opportunities amongst the 4 of us, in spite of the fact that we come from varied industries. I'll just quickly try to summarize a perspective here from the world of banking. But again, more than banking, I'm also going to talk about the people side of things when it comes to AI. And I think all 3 of you, somewhere or the other, touched upon the importance of talent that we have in this space and how important it is for organizations to hone it, right? So there's always going to be a gulf between talent requirements and availability when it comes to cutting edge skills. Upskilling the workforce is a key part of the culture, because if you don't upskill your workforce, motivate them to be to really be people, those who can be ambassadors for the right kind of AI, to adopt it, not see it as a threat, that's absolutely going to be the top priority for organizations in this day and age. Technologies are there, new technologies are being built, but having the right kind of people who understand the business and who can harness the technologies available will determine how successful the organization will be. I spend a lot of time with data and also managing centers. So one of the points that I'd also like to make is the importance of customer centricity. getting your data scientists, AI engineers closer to the business and the customers, whether it be the world of rural finance, whether it be the world of automotive, the automobile industry, or whether it's the world of air and water purification systems, right? That's so important. That end of the day, AI is there to support the business, and it needs the people, those who use it, need to get closer to the business and the customers that we rep. So that's so true. But especially so, while it's true across technologies, especially with the world of data, it's not so much the size of the team that makes the magic happen, but it's about how passionate they are, right? How connected they feel to the business and the customers that they're able to serve with the technologies that they use. So for me, that's also one of the key tenets that we have. It's been a great discussion. We're pretty much close to closing time. So I'm going to leave this on a bit of a fun note. I'm going to ask each of y'all, a quick light moment, right? What's your favorite either AI movie or a book or a favorite character that you have, right? So let's start with, let me go reverse this time. Let me start with VN. What would your pick be?
Probably, I think, Star Wars and the Terminator. So those days, 20, 30 years back, when you saw these movies, it was all fiction. So we never believed that those are possible. Now that fiction became a vision, then a vision, now you're seeing this as a reality. So I think, Star Wars set the kind of the tone for the entire thing.
What about you, Rohit?
I would talk about Jarvis from Iron Man. I think that we are very close to singularity, and there would be a moment where Alexa or Siri would go pretty close to Jarvis from Iron Man. So that's my favorite character.
Okay, that's an interesting one. What are you, Suresh?
You stole all my characters. So anyway, I agree with both of them. I think Terminator and Jarvis are both excellent role models, I would say, for us, especially if you're looking at what we want to do. But of late, I've been reading a series called Future of War. And it's amazing. I mean, I think I go back to what VN was talking about, ethics and responsible usage and all. This book will literally, I mean, you will start getting a little bit afraid about what the future holds in terms of how wars will be fought and where and all it will touch. So it's quite interesting in that sense, in terms of how AI has been applied to almost everything. I think the author has brought it all together in a wonderful fashion, which gives you, it also allows you to start relating to a little bit more about what you're doing in your organization and start looking for some parallels there as well. But it's quite scary in terms of what that book, it's about 2040 kind of a period, but it doesn't look like it's a myth. It may very well become a reality.
No, that's brilliant. I think if I were to choose one, and I was just thinking of when VN was saying Star Wars, I was more of a Star Trek fan personally. So Commander Data in Star Trek was always a favorite. He was an android, and this is the first time I really saw something that was not, the talk about something not being human. The other character I still remember, and it's very old, is 2001: A Space Odyssey. You have HAL 9000, which is the antagonist, right? So that's not a positive character, but that's probably the first time I think the world got used to the fact that AI can fight back, right? So it's got this very sinister tone where it says, Dave, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do it, right? If you remember the movie, I think that was an interesting moment in that movie. So thanks a ton to each and every one. Thank you for taking out time. It was a great discussion. I truly learned a lot. And with that, Justin, let me hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, on that candid note, thank you, Pradeep, Rohit, Suresh, and Venkatesh for some great inputs and perspectives. That was a great discussion. Thank you once again.